I'm always surprised when I run into, especially a lot of Reformed theological type guys, younger guys even today. And normally the discussion's around right theology, but I don't hear much about a lot of, hey, we're reaching lost people. If your church is doing a great job of being missional, but nobody's converting, it's a fail. Mm-hmm. It's a fail.
Welcome back to the Grimké podcast.
There it is.
I have the Right Reverend.
That's right.
Douglas Logan.
To my right.
To my right. That's why you're the Right Reverend. I have the Left Reverend, Doug Ponder, over here.
First time I've ever been called left.
Wow.
I'll take it. The left behind.
True.
I'll take it. You know,
That's amazing.
And Brian Lachlan.
Yes, glad to be here, Joe.
Back in the booth.
As always.
Center field.
I know.
Okay.
We're recovering. We have been to the SBC convention, the PCA General Assembly.
Been a long month.
Back in the studio, a little exhausted by all the Roberts rules, but ready to talk about mission today.
I'm going to kill Robert when I meet him in heaven.
I'd
like to make a motion on what we talk about.
I know.
Is there any second? Call to question. I'm learning these things.
Point of verification.
I know.
Special privilege. Point of special privilege.
I'm scared to step up to the mic, though.
It's ridiculous.
You would have a special privilege.
Oh, goodness.
Which is interesting because you usually don't hear emotion. Let's
point
go
of
save
privilege.
more
Isn't
lost
point of
people.
privilege, man.
Oh, you don't? Yeah, that's true.
Point of special privilege.
I like your attempt to segue into our topic, Joe.
That's my job.
It was missed, but he said, you don't normally hear emotion that says, I'd like to see more lost people saved.
I like that.
That's my favorite attempted transition of all time.
That is great.
I say attempted because you were talked over, but I heard it. The Lord
I
heard
think it would have been great if it hadn't been talked over personally. So,
Yeah. It
but
was.
we do need to talk about that today. we want to revisit some of the missional discussion.
We do.
Talk about mission in general. Talk about those who need to hear the gospel. I do think there's definitely a need today where I don't hear as much emphasis out of as many places as there maybe should be in terms of Christ came to redeem a people. Therefore, his people need to get after sharing that good news so people can get redeemed.
Absolutely.
So there's just not as much of an emphasis there, maybe as there should be. I don't know why that is, but you're not hearing it as much.
Right. I mean, we were praying beforehand. We were grateful that someone loved God's mission enough to share the gospel with us, and that's why we're in this room. And so, if you're a Christian living, somebody cared about evangelism.
Yep.
Yes.
Whether it's your parents,
Right.
Pastor in a church that you were, brought to.
Somebody wrote an evangelistic book.
Somebody on a block.
sermon. Right.
Yeah, maybe just on the heels of getting together at the broader conventional levels this month with all of wonderful folks that are serving
Great people.
Christ Church everywhere. But there's a lot of discussions that go on at these things, a lot of debates. A lot of people get worked up about a lot of things, but we wouldn't be able to get worked up about any of those things if somebody hadn't shared the gospel with us, so we can actually enter into Christ and then talk about the things that should be better.
Exactly right.
It could need improvement. So if we kind of miss how we got here and how the mission moves forward, it's just going to be a little bit of a detriment.
Yeah. So for us, we're kind of raising the alarm to say we think there's a little bit of a slip right now going on.
There's a slip. There's definitely a slip.
Problem.
Take even in terms of church planting, and this has been the case for a while. When we planted almost 20 years ago,
all of us planted. Yeah.
Yes, I mean you had a lot of the quote unquote missional movement,
Sure.
and all of the trappings and how that came about. But a lot of it was, hey, we need to engage, especially the U.S. context, as a mission field with the gospel to reach lost people, those who are without God in the world, do not know Christ, need to know him, and the only way in which we come to know him is through the good news of Jesus.
Right.
So you actually, at the time, it was how do we reach these people? How do we actually take the gospel, reach folks? How do we plant churches that are reaching lost people?
Right.
Even anecdotally, a lot of the church planting discussion today it doesn't seem to be as highly emphasizing, hey, you plant a church to plant the gospel.
Right.
And reach lost people that then forms a new community that is the church.
It is, yes.
It's not merely to start another service with a smattering of Christians that you have cobbled together, whether willfully or unwillfully, from other congregations in a zone and call that planting a church.
Right.
Yeah, that's a church launch.
Right.
Yeah,
That's not a church plant.
That's a consolidated schism gathering.
That's right.
If you want to.
Absolutely.
There's church fragmentation. It's not church planting.
Right.
Yes. And in the mid-2000s, when we were getting excited about church planting, it really was church planting to reach lost people. But that wasn't the first time it happened. So things typically go in cycles.
Right.
And we're seeing the nadir of the cycle, and we'd like to see it self-correct.
Yes. I have to. What is the nadir?
The low point.
Okay, the low point. I'm always getting
the opposite
educated
of
by you
zenith.
guys. Okay.
Yes.
right.
So I first learned the word.
I knew you would chase this. This is what I thought.
Yes,
Total
Walter
aside.
Wallace. He wrote a fantastic essay that has two different titles.
So it's not Ralph.
Originally, something like supposedly
joke.
fun
Come
thing
on
I'll
now.
never
I
do
loved it.
again.
Yes.
And shipped out. So those are two titles for the same article.
Alexa, set an
And
alarm.
They're amazing. It's amazing. He makes fun of a cruise ship, all the people who go on cruises, and he calls it the USS Nadir. And it's amazing. Honestly, the whole article is worth the price of admission. It's so funny.
It is.
But that's where I learned the term.
Yeah.
I had to look it up.
The low point.
Yes.
The low point.
The
Just for
opposite
you.
of
It's the low point. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. It is cyclical.
Yes.
Like it happens. But
Yes.
it is worth mentioning.
Look at me. That was 15 seconds. Doc.
But this part is not 15 seconds. So if you think about it, one of the things
17.
worth, even in our age at this point, is we have to realize guys in their 20s and 30s, if you will, most of this conversation, which was 95 to 2015-ish,
Yeah.
is history now.
Right.
It's not the common experience of guys in the 20s and 30s decades, per se. They don't know all the background, this and that. So there was an emphasis on we need to get the gospel to folks. We need to plant churches.
Right.
How are we doing that? A lot around this missional discussion.
Right.
And then a lot of that language and emphasis has nadered.
Right. And I would say now,
Come on, bro.
has nadered.
We can use it. Yeah,
That's
not bad. We can use it. We
We
can use it.
when we make up words. I mean, on the word missional was made up.
Right.
Let's be real.
It was.
Okay, there
It was.
It was.
It's a great article that
Brilliant segue right there, by
John,
the way.
you like
I
that one?
appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, it is the origins of
Jonathan
missional,
Lehman
though.
wrote an article in 2010 about, basically what in the world is the missional church.
Okay.
And he just does a deep dive on the term, where it came from. And I don't recall whether he mentioned the first published mention of the book
Okay.
was not Daryl Guter. You and I were talking about him before we began recording. He wrote a book called The Missional Church in like 1998,
Okay.
but actually predating him by 15 years. There was a Baptist professor at Golden Gate in California, Golden Gate Seminary, who wrote a book called The God Who Sins, and it was something like a fresh take on
Sends,
biblical mission or something.
yes.
And in that book, he coins the term, or at least first puts it into print, the idea of missional. But Lehman goes on to point out this was a conversation that had been going on for a long time. Sure. It actually began in a funny place. It wasn't conservatives. It was ecumenicals. It was more liberal-minded Christians building on the theology of Karl Barth and some of his disciples downstream of them, getting into guys like Leslie Newbigin, who wasn't a liberal, but
No.
he wouldn't be a conservative in the same way that we would be.
No.
He would think we were all fundamentalists with a capital F because we think the Bible is inerrant
Right.
and fully authoritative, and he would reserve that for Jesus alone.
Right.
Kind of pit them against each other.
That's right. Well, yeah, and just a little context for folks that, especially younger guys that have maybe no idea how this has informed the current discussion, which does shape the current landscape, if you will, in the broader evangelical church at large, or the church at large. Is a lot of Newbigin was early '80s.
Yeah.
Right, he was a missionary for 30 years. He died in '98, and so better part of the 20th century was a lot of his
Return to England.
return to England after
Yeah,
30 some years in
the
India.
60s or something.
Yeah, and then said, "Hey, how do we actually now the changing landscape of England? How do we actually understand this context now and re-engage it as missionaries?"
Right.
And a lot of what he wrote, I mean, there are things he wrote that I think are potentially dangerous, and there's other things he wrote that I think were just flat out wrong. But the basic premise
And a lot of good stuff.
was great.
Okay.
The basic premise was.
I didn't want to leave a full
No, I was getting
negative
there.
note.
No,
Right.
I was getting there. I was saving the best for last.
Okay.
The basic premise, I think, is wonderful. He said that the West stands in need of a missionary encounter with the gospel.
Right.
So he's not quite using the word missional, but the idea is there. The idea was, hey, there's lots of people in Britain who might claim the label Christian, but they don't have the substance of it. They don't love the Lord with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. They don't have saving faith in Jesus. They were baptized as a baby in a church somewhere, and then they've never darkened the door since, except for a funeral of their grandmother. They're not Christians, and they don't know what the gospel is. And who's going to tell them if we don't?
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
And so that was sort of a lot of the heartbeat of his work, his project.
And a fresh encounter, like you mentioned, was you still have the 20th century in terms of its cultural ingenuity, advancement in terms of technology and industry transformed, especially the West, that the entire landscape of various communities was distinct and different. So there is always a need to say, hey, who are my actual neighbors? And then where are they coming from? What are the ideas that they have? What are their thoughts about things, their lifestyles, and how are those in contrast to the good news of Christ? And then how do I meet them where they're at with this gospel? And therefore, there's a need to assess what forms, what expressions, what methods, if you will, we're utilizing, whether that complements the mission or actually ends up being an unintended hindrance to the mission. There's a lot of pitfalls there, but at least the heart behind it's wise. And if the church doesn't reflect on those things continuously, it does become a insular enclave that is self-facing and having a self-referential conversation that has nothing to do with necessarily how do we actually reach those who do not know God.
Right. And I think this is how the label, the term missional, suddenly became popular in more conservative, more evangelical circles in the early 2000s.
Right.
I mean, to be honest, Newbigin was pretty unknown outside of scholarly circles. Maybe if you went to seminary in the late 20th century and studied missiology, you would know him. But he was largely introduced to the American church through the works of Tim Keller, who was a big fan of Newbigin. And remember, Keller's church started in 1989 and was still relatively small until 9/11.
Right.
It more than doubled after 9/11 because he preached a very powerful sermon that brought the truth of God's word from John 11 to bear on that specific tragedy that had just occurred.
Right.
And something like 2,000 people came to his church, heard this, and then began attending and joining and so on. So that's part of it. And then Christopher Wright. Remember his book, The Mission of God?
Well, I was going to say, to Dr. Keller's credit, I mean, it was one of the brilliance of Tim Keller was he was an evangelist at heart.
Yeah.
And he loved
Trying to
those-
reach
that was
New
Keller at
Yorkers.
his best.
At his best. So he was constantly, as the brilliant man that he was and a scholar, constantly seeking to figure out ways to reach everyone where they're at. And Newbigin was a wonderful source who preceded in a lot of ways, especially in the UK, having that conversation and thinking through those issues.
Right.
So it's a great interlocutor in order to figure it out.
So did you guys all read Christopher Wright's Mission of God when it came
did.
out?
Yeah.
It was
2006?
massive. Everybody picked it up. I'm like, oh, this is here we
Yeah,
go.
well, you and I were in seminary
Buckle
at
up.
that time.
Yep.
And that's all everybody was talking about.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, everybody. And so it's been a while since I've read it, but if I remember correctly, the basic thesis of the book, and I'm paraphrasing here, okay, but the thesis was, it's
If you
more
don't
accurate.
footnote this, we know it's wrong.
That's right. It's more accurate to say, to say that God has a mission for his people, but rather to say that God has a people for his mission.
Right.
And so by that, he meant if you say, yes, God has a church, and then he's given the church a job to do. Well, that's not wrong, but the problem with talking in that way, if you're not careful, is exactly what you were just describing. A church can become programmatic, self-serving, insular, and forget that the whole reason that there is a church is that somebody somewhere shared the gospel, these people heard it, were called out of darkness into God's marvelous light in order to, Peter says, proclaim the praises or the excellencies of the one who did all of this.
Yeah.
And so it might be more helpful to think in terms of actually God has a mission. God does. He made a world for a reason. He sent Christ for a reason. Christ is coming back for a reason. The Spirit was given for a reason, and the church was created to serve that reason, right? And so instead of saying, yes, there's a church and we have a job to do, it's better to say, no, God has a plan.
Yes.
And then he redeems a people to serve that plan, to facilitate that plan, to see that plan accomplished in this world until he returns.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think the plan language or the purpose language is the way to look at it, because a lot of Wright's book, if I recall as well, was a broad biblical theology of how God has always had a plan, a mission that he has been about from the beginning, even in creation and through his work of redemption through his people.
Right.
So the bigger idea is it's intrinsic to what it means to be his people. It's not merely an afterthought or an add-on or merely something that's accidental given to us as a job to do, but it's part and parcel to what it means to be the church, as we are God's mission in the world.
Yeah, he's a
So therefore, it ends up baking into the cake.
no, absolutely.
And that breath.
As just to that point is, if he's a missionary God and we're a missionary people, we find now our identity in being described as those people.
Yeah.
I call your daughter my lovely niece Sophia, I call her a Lachlan. Because that's what she is.
Right.
So you would call us a missional people. And to footnote the quote, right, it's not so much the case that the God has a mission for his church in the world as that God has a church for his mission in the world. Mission was not made for the church. The church was made for mission.
Is that page
God's
12?
mission.
What page is that?
I have
It
no
would be
clue.
amazing if you knew that.
Well, I just you said
could.
it, I thought, I think it's around there.
It's early. It's definitely early
My
on.
paraphrase was
I
pretty
can't
close.
verify the exact page number, but that sounds right to me.
Yeah,
though.
your paraphrase was great. So as I read Christopher
I
Wright,
can see it in my mind, but it's very fuzzy.
Yeah, very fuzzy.
I was
It's
a
more
stu-
times than you think. A lot of it.
I was a student at art. I was a student at RTS, and I took the mission class at RTS. I was a student at RTS when I got introduced. Actually, I think Phil Riken introduced me to it, and then I took it in class when I was a student at RTS. And I mean, I went from there to David Bosch Transforming Mission, and then over the Gooder, and it just blew my mind. When I wrote On the Block, I was highly influenced by Christopher Wright, and it helped me to understand the deeper dynamics of my heart for mission as I grew up in the National Baptist Church, National Black Baptist Church. It's not called that, but it's largely an African-American church. Man, we just did tracks. So the track thing always was weird to me.
Yeah.
So to read.
Yeah, it wasn't as much. It's mission's not a program we run.
Right.
It's the extension of what it means to be God's people in the world.
Right.
And so I always, to your point a little bit, our stories are similar in the sense that I wasn't a Christian early years. So I came in college. Yeah. So somebody had to come out and as a missionary to share the good news with us, and therefore. Right. So if you always, by God's grace, have been a part of the church and a Christian a very long time, which is wonderful. Unless you're intentional about reminding yourself of that we're an extension of God's mission in the world, and He is on mission, and we need to be on mission. That it can be just an add-on is something you do.
Right.
I think even context at the time, the reason some of the discussion in the late '90s around the emergent church or the mission, the missional discussion, or Christopher Wright and the mission of God, that sort of thing, was because missions was seen as something over there.
Yeah.
So when it came to domestic U.S. context, being a missionary meant that you go overseas.
Yes.
You leave the country.
Right.
Now,
There's no missions here.
Right.
It's over there.
Look, I worked for the IMB for a year as an editor, and there are folks who want to preserve that term for people who leave their home culture and go to another one. And I understand what they're trying to do.
Okay.
I think at their best, those folks are trying to emphasize the extreme difficulty and sacrifice, planning, preparation, and all the rest that it takes to literally leave everything you've known, your family, your home, all of that, and go somewhere else. But what I would say to them is, yes, but fundamentally, so take away the accidental properties of what they're doing and just look at the core. The core of it is they're trying to see the gospel proclaimed, people saved, and yes, then discipled, equipped, and so forth for the work of ministry to the glory of God. And aren't we doing that here? We are. Of course. So there's a lot of overlap, even if there are different degrees of what is
continuity. You can't expect the people to go do it over there when they don't do it over here.
That's true, too.
It was always amazing when we were playing the church years ago.
Oh, gosh, I know where you're going.
Folks would come up and say, "Are you guys doing missions? Have you guys thought about missions?" And every time I'd
we are missions.
I'd have to keep it in a wrap and say, as a church plant, we are a mission.
Right.
Like, yes, we're doing missions here. Yes, this is a mission. You need to actually be on mission wherever you're planted and rooted. And then also, of course, that includes across the globe and those who have never heard and unreached peoples and all the rest of it. So it's always a both and. So I don't mind folks that want to sweat the term and truncate it and say it's only for this particular application. That's fine. But let's not miss the substance of actually what we need to be.
Chris Wright's quote is also helpful because he says that God has a church for his mission, not God has Christians for his mission.
That's good.
And so some of the corrective in the mid-2000s is there was a rise in 80s, 90s, and early 2000s of parachurch ministries. Whether they said it or not, they were frustrated the church wasn't trying to reach lost people enough.
Yes.
A lot of those parachurch ministries were focused around high schoolers, early college. And so
Young Life.
Exactly. And even, I mean, some of the kids, I was converted through Young Life. Some of those kids grew up through parachurch ministries and were like, well, shouldn't the church be doing this? And then some of them became pastors. And so some of the desire and affinity towards the term missional is a corrective to, and I love parachurch ministries. If you want to go out and save high schoolers and college students, like love that,
Right.
100% for it. But the mission isn't offloaded to parachurch ministries to reach lost people. It's a part of the warp and woof.
Subcontracted.
It is. That's right. Right. It is a part of what the church does, which is even reflected. I mean, I think for most of us in seminaries, you might have a class on evangelism.
Right.
Really, evangelism should be a part of Greek exegesis. It should be a part of dogmatics. It should be a part of church history. Like,
Yes, I almost said this earlier. And then I was thinking, that sounds, or I thought about it when you said, I took a class on mission. And I thought, well, I know why schools do that.
Sure.
Heck, we might even do that in our seminary.
Right.
I don't know. I don't control all the classes, but I know this. What you're saying is a kind of paradigm shift that helps you rethink everything in light of the ultimate end. And so it's really a way of saying, yeah, but why are we doing Greek? Isn't it so we can, yes, better interpret the Bible, but to what end? So that we might explain it to others? Why? So that they might believe it, hear it, believe it, obey it, glorify the Lord. You see what I'm saying? So when this is why I think Wright's work was so helpful, is because he was trying to help people see, if you talk as if evangelism is just a job or missions is just a job the church has among many jobs, then lots of the things you're doing, you'll actually disconnect from the mission that God himself has. And you won't see them as existing to serve that mission in some significant way. And then what is their purpose anymore?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, then you become a mission-centered missionary and not a gospel-centered guy seeking to see people meet Jesus. Roland Allen is one of my the Roland Allen, the old bishop. He just did a good job wrote several books, The Mission of Paul and the Explosive Expansion of the Church. I know I'm saying the title of that book wrong, but one of his quotes is, "Missionary zeal does not grow out of intellectual beliefs, nor out of theological arguments, but out of love."
Right.
And I think when I got hit in the face with truly understanding mission to what we're talking about, man, it was an intentional reality that I was saved. And I'm happy I was saved. And I'm so glad somebody came. You know, the old church, we say, somebody prayed for me, had me on their mind, took the time and prayed for me. And then I just saw it less as a program, to our point, and more as God using someone to move towards me in love. That changed how I saw mission. That changed how I planted my church. That changed everything for me.
hey, this is Joe Holland, professor of Christian ministry at Grimké Seminary. I want to invite you all out to our men's conference this summer, July 27th through 29th in Richmond, Virginia. We're calling the conference Churchmen. We're hoping to encourage men from around the country to lead and live as godly men in their local churches and families. You'll have a chance to hear preaching and teaching from your favorite Grimké faculty. We'll also have H.B. Charles and Michael Foster with us. Get your tickets today at grimkemen.com. I hope to see you this summer.
Yeah, if you don't see mission as intrinsic to what it looks like to fulfill, bringing glory to Christ and his purposes and his plan in the world, which is making disciples of all nations, which means we have to bring the gospel to them. They have to hear the gospel, they have to trust, and therefore they have to be built up in the gospel. Then it leads to fragmentation, compartmentalization, or outsourcing, instead of it being intrinsic to how we think as Christians in the world now and every moment of every day, that we're growing as disciples, and we're also desiring more people to become disciples and grow. So it doesn't land in, well, now I'm in this phase of my Christian life where I'm just thinking about doctrine and I'm thinking about multiplying and getting married.
Right.
Well, who cares about the lost people around? Who cares about the neighbors?
That's right.
Who cares whether or not we're actually moving the plan of God forward? It ends up in fragmentation, and then the mission kind of gets pushed to the side a lot of times and gets downplayed. So even a lot of the discussion in the 2000s, either the emergent church folks, it's like a full bygone thing, was how do we actually engage our current culture in the U.S. as with the fresh missionary counter.
Exactly.
You know, there are all types of terrible tactics,
Yes.
Right.
and pragmatic, distortive means that were used,
Right.
that actually were unfaithful.
I think that's key because some people listening will hear missional and emergent, and they'll say that's liberal.
Correct.
We're not going to do that.
Right.
So where did that come from?
Well, so some of the words that were being used by folks in some of the circles you were just mentioning at the time, words like contextualization, words like incarnational.
Right.
Of those two, contextualization is a far better word than incarnational. Incarnational is fraught with problems. I know what people are trying to say when they say it, but the incarnation of Jesus was extremely unique. And
Right.
yes, I know, what is it, John 20,
Well, you
21, even as the Father sent me, so I am sending you. I
right.
know that. So
Well, you had expressions of that type of sentiment, even in sociologists like James Davison Hunter.
Yep.
So his To Change the World book,
Yeah.
his argument for faithful presence in a lot of ways echoed a lot of the incarnational language, if you will, in terms of we need to be exemplary like Christ in a place. But of course, it has its weaknesses if it isn't seen through a missional lens. So
yeah, so what happened in many cases, many cases, was contextualization, which properly, I mean, you and I wrote an article for Table Talk on this, for Ligonier. It was about how the word itself means, or should mean, I say, that we're trying to make the gospel understandable.
that's right.
It has nothing to do with making it palatable.
Right.
As if you can soften it or sweeten it in some way.
Or leave some parts out.
Leaving
Right.
parts out,
Right.
changing other bits to make it seem more likable
Yeah.
to people whose, according to the Bible, their hearts are hard, they're calloused,
Right.
their brains are darkened, their
Eyes are
souls are
blind.
their eyes are blind, their spirits are in rebellion. You can't take a message and make it seem sweet and good to that person. But those who tried to do so end up changing it, and so that what they end up saying isn't the gospel anymore.
Yes, it's
Yeah, that's
compromise,
right.
not contextualization.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's a fundamental misunderstanding of missiology and context. So it's not that the message itself should ever be changed, but that was the distortion of understanding how context relates to us bringing the message in ways that are understandable or properly accommodative to the hearers to be persuasive.
And
when the context itself is the one that dictates what you can and cannot say, what
Yep.
the message should and should not be,
Right.
then it's just called compromise. That's not contextualization.
And I honestly think, especially for evangelicals who sort of lost their way in some of these things, it's almost always born out of good intentions
Right.
with a dangerous level of ignorance, right? So
Right.
it's good intentions, but ignorantly carried out. So I'll just give you a couple examples. What people would do is they would point to actual real deal examples of contextualization. The most famous one, it's used in like all the literature, was Adoniram Judson. Remember? He went to Myanmar, which was called Burma at the time, and he dressed in Burmese clothes. He learns the Burmese language. He eats Burmese food, lives in a Burmese style house, and preaches the gospel to people in Burma, and eventually sees many saved and starts a church. And praise
Right.
God, what a
Yep.
success story. Yes. And they say, see, that's what we need to do. So then they set up something like, we're going to be a biker church that reaches bikers. Or
Gavin.
we're going to be a hip hop church that reaches hip hop culture.
There's a cowboy church in
Right,
Culpeper.
cowboy, all this stuff. And there's lots of problems with these things, okay? But one of them is this. There's something neutral about the Burmese language. There's nothing intrinsically
Right.
good or bad about it.
Right.
Yeah.
There's nothing
It's
intrinsically.
also something that's not an affinity; it's universal to the context. So
It's not an affinity, exactly.
No, it's not an affinity. It's not a style preference,
Correct.
or
It's a method of truth proclamation.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And-
Or
but think
lifestyle
about how that's
quality.
different with something like hip hop culture.
Right.
What you wouldn't say is, yeah, we're going to be a hip hop church to reach hip hop culture. And I'm like, well, not everything in hip hop culture is worth embodying in order to reach those who are in it. There might be some things that are fine, but not all of them would be equally neutral. And the same would be true for all the other ones that we mentioned, like biker culture, all of that stuff.
Right.
And so what they did was they would wrongly appeal to affinities instead of recognizing this is something that's just universal, endemic is the right word, to a people in a place.
Yep.
And then secondly,
Yeah, and just for folks that might not be familiar with the language of affinity, we're talking about a segregated subculture within a unified larger culture. And so when you build your gospel mission on a segregated subculture, it by definition isn't universally reaching that culture that it intends.
Agreed.
And ends up being partial and separationist and actually not actually reflecting Christ's mission for all peoples.
Right.
So it reduplicates a lot of the sinful partiality that affinities and subcultures actually represent in these larger cultures.
Yeah. Right.
So instead of uniting a people that are part of a actual united social entity or context or people in terms of shared language and dress and those sorts of things, it actually builds it on the things that are actually far secondary.
Yep.
Yeah, and it just makes a segregated bunch of people making the gospel be modified for those people.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's one problem. The other problem is it's a false analogy. The Burmese language, the Burmese style of dress, the Burmese diet, those things are not intrinsically good or bad. They're neutral. God doesn't care whether you have fish for breakfast or not. He just doesn't.
No.
But he does care about how you might dress and present yourself to others, right? He cares about the language you use. He cares about whether you're married to the woman you have children with. And so there would be aspects or elements of hip hop culture that the gospel and the scriptures would critique. And just to say, well, we're going to adopt that culture as a frame, and that's how we're going to live and embody to reach those people is a poor analogy that doesn't understand the difference between language and lifestyle.
Right.
See what I mean?
No, that's right. That's exactly right.
That's right.
Yep. Nor does the church, again, need to ignore these things.
Right.
So this is where you get ghettoization in a lot of churches, where you're not saying, I need to become all things to as many people as possible without compromising the message itself, in order that they might actually hear the good news of Christ and come to meet Christ and grow up in Christ.
Right.
So if without that, we just say, well, we're being mature Christians.
Right.
We're the church. Yeah, but you're not the church on mission.
Right.
And you're not concerned with reaching the lost people.
That's good.
Right. And therefore you're unintentionally, without reflecting on it well, creating a declining enclave instead of actually fulfilling God's plan in the world.
Agreed. And I'd say, I don't know if y'all would agree with me, but the missional movement, especially of the 2000s and 2010s, when you said, I want to be a missionary, I want to act in a missional way, it was almost ubiquitously understood as, I want to reach liberals and hyper-liberals.
Or hipsters, right?
Or
It was
hipsters,
a big, That was a big term
right.
at the
I want
time.
to reach the patchouli
urban
guy
hipsters.
with the coexist bumper sticker on the back of his car.
Yeah,
And those are lost people that need to be
Yep,
reached.
100%.
But you didn't have, it wasn't assumed that you were trying to reach non-Christians who are right or far right.
Yeah.
And so when people slipped, if you're trying to reach, if you think missional is reaching liberals, and you slip, you're going to slip in a liberal direction.
Sure.
So it makes sense that some in the missional movement, if they had a very myopic view of who they were trying to reach, and then they slipped theologically, they took some of the connotation of the missional movement in a liberal direction.
Yeah, it's difficult because a lot of the historic realities of that time period in terms of missional generically is we need to reach those who do not yet understand Christ. You had a lot of cultural transformation at the time.
Yes.
So you have various, as the culture was changing, if you will, generationally, rapidly, through a lot of different means. And this has been happening for a very long time.
Right.
Saying how do we actually accommodate well, not the message, but our presentation and meeting folks where they're actually at in the places that they're at, and communicating in ways that are understandable to them, so that they would be able to respond to the gospel. That a lot of that on its best day was the heart. The problem, as you mentioned, is because it's mindful of culture. When you confuse Christ with the culture, or the culture becomes the rule for what type of Christ it will accept, then therefore it's going to compromise, liberalize, apostatize.
That's exactly right.
Syncretize, all the other I's.
I like that.
There's a lot of
That's
I's in there that ultimately eviscerate the gospel, and the church ends up looking just like the culture.
Exactly.
So it lands itself in cultural captivity every time. I mean, one of the most, remember Dr. Keller mentioned this in 2008, a conference in New York we all went to, and he was just saying, hey, the Missio Dei movement, the Mission of God movement, and the early 20th century, and had its roots in the late 1800s, ultimately was the same thing, saying we need to get the gospel out, reach our neighbors, and it needs to transform society and this sort of thing. But when society starts dictating which God we will accept, and ultimately it produces all types of idolatries and compromise. So you had like Unitarian Universalism that came out of that.
That's right.
And said, well, maybe it's not just the exclusivity of Christ and his redemptive work into the cross, and he's
We're
the one and only true
Trinitarianism.
God. Right. Trinitarianism, no. It's who knows.
Right.
And because you're well-intended, at least you're stepping towards God in some fashion. Let's just affirm that and be there. And then therefore the gospel is kind of walked away from. So we've had a lot of that, even in the last 25 years.
Agreed.
Where folks have accommodated too greatly to the culture, and therefore the church just looks like the culture, and it's lost the distinctness of God's particular redemptive plan in the
I
world.
went to a breakout session at that very conference that was an egregious violation of the very thing that Keller himself said. I wish he had been there, and had he been, it would have been great if he stood up and said, you guys weren't paying attention. In that breakout session, they were sharing ideas on how you could share the gospel
With the laws, right? I
with the
remember that
laws.
session.
And one of them was you get seed packets of flowers, and you throw them out the window as you drive around your city, so that they might take root and bring beauty to a community.
Nice.
And then people would see the beauty, and you could have a conversation with them about the source of beauty. And did you know God made flowers? And I had hair back then, which I could pull out, but and I wanted to do it.
Maybe that's why you're bald.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's insane.
I'm just praising God I missed that session, because I definitely would have had some thoughts about it.
You don't throw flower seeds out your window in Richmond?
I just want
But
to...
it's worth mentioning. I mean, this folks hate this, but it's baby with the bathwater all the time when it comes to these discussions.
Misuse. Right.
There's always admixture of folks that are misappropriating, misunderstanding what God's plan and mission is in the world, and therefore they throw those things out.
Right.
Or they misappropriate and distort them in these egregious ways that you're talking about. That has nothing to do with faithful gospel witness.
And I don't care about... I honestly
Planting
don't care.
trees is not telling people about Jesus.
It's not.
It is not.
But
not
if,
at all.
And if...
It's
and
creation stewardship.
And yeah,
like trees.
exactly.
But that's different.
And this is what I was going to say. Like, I don't even care about the term. I care about the substance.
Right.
We've talked about this before. I know we have. We've done it on this podcast where we heard a message that Kenny Stokes preached at a Desiring God conference, and it was wonderful. And he was looking at the Great Commission, and he said, we make people. That's what we do. We make people. That's missional language without the word missional, right?
Right. Sure.
And it's big enough to get away from some. I remember I read a criticism. I won't say who it was. It doesn't matter who it was. But there was a well-known gadfly in the PCA who was very upset with Baptists in particular and evangelicals in general for always talking about the Great Commission, because according to him, it's so much bigger than that. I'm like, yeah, but when I look at the Great Commission, I see those words where Jesus says, teaching them to obey or observe all that I've commanded.
Right.
So that actually is quite big.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Not to be too cheeky, but I mean, the Great Commission might actually be great.
It's pretty great. No, it's not a title in the Bible. It's
Pretty big. Maybe
I think
the
it's
scope
great.
of it is a lot bigger than people understand.
So
in a lot of
yes,
ways.
if you don't stop with evangelism, right? You long for conversion, you work for conversion, and then yes, you disciple those who get converted. But my point is, those aren't. This is where we're back to where we started. Those aren't separate things.
Right.
They're all flowing from as different aspects or different parts of the same one mission. That God created a world so that He could have a people who glorifies Him and enjoys Him forever.
Yeah.
That's why we're here. We make that kind of people. That's what the church exists to do. So everything that's necessary to make that kind of people, do that and connect all of your work toward that end.
Right. Yeah, well, I think we're at a moment that this is worth mentioning, because we need to have a fresh conversation again, like every generation does.
Yes.
In terms of what do we do now in order to continue to stay on mission.
Yeah.
So we've come through a clarifying moment the last 10 to 15 years, where you've had the church that has fallen all over itself for cultural approval, that has ultimately landed itself in a continual state of compromise and compromising, that therefore syncretizing to look more and more continuously in its practices, in its teachings, in its lifestyles, and its expressions, just like the surrounding culture. And that trajectory is continuing.
Yeah.
And then you also have those who looked around and said, hey, wait a minute. we need to clarify who we are. We need to mend the nets, and we need to man the towers and rebuild the walls.
Sure.
But they're also in danger of forgetting the lost.
Yes, if they were doing those things for the sake of reaching the lost,
Correct.
that would be one thing.
Yes.
Like just use the example of politics, right? We've done a couple episodes on that. Everybody wants to talk about it these days. Everybody's talking about that. But there is a sense in which politics can and should serve the mission of God.
Sure.
That's completely true. Everybody in the Reformed tradition, Luther, Calvin, all of their descendants, everybody agrees there is a second use of the law that its function is, it's literally called the usus politicus. It is to restrain evil people from being worse than they otherwise would be. That has a shaping influence on society. It restrains people from doing the kinds of things that would make it harder to reach others with the gospel. So could politics aimed in that direction potentially serve the mission of God? Yes. Does that make politics the mission of God? No. It's an instrumental means, right, to something much greater than itself. So a church who would encourage its people to vote for policies that would create conditions that were favorable to gospel proclamation, church health, church would make it easier for churches to do their job and so on. That's awesome.
Yep.
Do it. But don't do it in such a way that you think that's our end-all, be-all goal.
Yep.
That's what we're existing to do, is to get the right policies passed. No, I want to see good policies passed for something even bigger and more important than that. I think that I think that's pretty simple.
Understanding mission as an identity also helps the church guard on constantly being reactionary. And I hate to use like the both sides way, because I don't think one is just compromising.
Right.
That's right.
The other needs to, the quote unquote folks on the right, whatever that means, meaning those who actually still believe the scriptures, possibly, and are trying to uphold them in faithful ways, need to not forget the mission.
Yes.
So unintentionally, they need to be full-orbed Christians. And what does it mean to be distinctly Christian? Of course, you need to understand how Christ relates to governing authorities and what he calls governing authorities to uphold, and what it looks like for us to be his people, to live distinctly in neighborhoods, what it looks like for us to evangelize our neighbors, whether the governing authorities are in line with the gospel and God's law or not. So we can't just move from, now we're going to fix this, now we're going to do this, and now we're going to do this, instead of we need to be on mission continuously in everything that we actually do to see God's redemptive purposes accomplished in his people and through his people for the world.
Yeah, that word missional was supposed to help to accomplish that.
Right.
But it became a thing unto itself. When I look back at those days, I just remember in some cases there was people churches that were largely doing a bad job at reaching the lost. So they didn't refer back to the Bible. They went to gimmicks, tricks, conferences, and quick how-to books, and they stayed away from the scriptures because they were just trying to figure things out to be more successful at mission. And whatever popped up, if there was pop-up ads, those were conferences back in the day where they said, do these 7 things and your church will be this, the old church growth movement.
Right.
And then I just remember Mark Driscoll pops up and takes us to this reformation.
Good old Uncle Mark.
Through some reformed theology, put some gospel teeth on top of contextualization, mission, and living for Christ. And that in and of itself, for me, was a big deal. But a lot of the churches, the old school churches, they got woke and Unitarian to just say, forget it, everybody's going to heaven, or they buckled down, us 4, no more, bar the door, and didn't care. Or you messed with, for me, I looked at Mark Driscoll, who I'd never heard of. He was a dude in Seattle. I was never going to Seattle. I'm from New Jersey. Seattle is another country. And I got assessed in Seattle as I joined the network. But to hear him talk in that book was new life for me. And again, it took off to fix. But there was so many. So I guess my argument is, hey, guys, if you're struggling with mission and you're listening to us, go to the Bible.
Right, sure, yeah.
Go to the Bible. Yeah. Don't go to the pop-up ads of gimmicks and tricks to get lost people. The gospel is real. The gospel works. Trust the gospel and do it as a church, because that's what I grabbed hold to.
And a lot of it, they have to take this good news and God's word and apply it to the context. So even go back to a lot of the cultural revolutions of the 60s and 70s. You had even the church growth movement in the 80s. I think you had a much more homogenous culture at the time preceding that, much more, and the church is always slower to respond to changing cultural environments. So you had a very homogenous traditional cultural environment. Mm-hmm. And then somebody said, I'm looking around my neighbors and there's a strong bit of discontinuity that may be necessary because we're distinctly Christians, but then also maybe unnecessary because we look like we're reenacting a bygone era. Mm-hmm. So even to your point, something like Mark Driscoll's book written in the early 2000s, I remember reading and thinking, hey, this guy is taking the gospel to folks like myself and others in ways, and he's going out and meeting these people. These people are not actually have no idea. They don't look like anything like church folks, if you will.
That's right.
In terms of its cultural expressions. So the church needs to be God's people in the various cultures and even in a dynamically changing culture, without compromising the message itself, but also going into those places to actually reach folks so that they can actually trust Christ. And therefore, we need to continually think that. And I'm always surprised when I run into especially a lot of Reformed theological type guys, younger guys even today. And normally the discussion's around right theology, but I don't hear much about a lot of, hey, we're reaching lost people.
Right.
Yeah.
So, they're normally when we talk, they're baffled to realize, you guys actually comprehensively are confessional and believe wholesale what the scriptures teach, and people very far from God are coming to Christ and say, yes, of course that's the case. But it's not by you just throwing big Bibles at them and telling them where they're wrong because they're not mature yet.
Right.
You got to realize when children are born into Christ's kingdom, they don't know what it looks like. They don't know what it means to dress, what conversations to be had. They don't know the dictionary. They don't know the scriptures. They don't know anything. Mm-hmm. You cannot expect new Christians to act like mature Christians before they become Christians.
Exactly.
Doesn't make any sense.
Amen.
Doesn't make any sense.
And our reformational history, those men, the Calvins, the D. Martin Lloyd-Joneses, the Robert Murray McShanes, cared deeply about reaching lost people. So if you're like, I'm a Reformed guy, I can name all the names. Like, well, do you share their love for the lost?
Oh, that's right.
If not, you're not reading all their works.
Yeah. A lot of the missional orientation would also bring about a lot more unity in the church that seems to be having a lot of stress and strain, especially at this moment. We need to clarify doctrine, and we need to be strong and mature, but also need to be on mission and embracing the love that God has for the world and for us so that we're actually mature. So those things are not opposed to one another. The mission of God is to reach those who do not know God, to share the love of God so they actually can know who He is and then grow up into Christ.
Correct.
And so we need to be mindful of that dynamic as we engage with other brothers.
Yes.
Those who are weak, those who are strong, those who are new, those who are old, those who have not matured, those who are maturing. And the mission helps us accommodate well towards one another and towards the world that needs to hear Christ.
Right.
Hear the good news of Christ.
So to just use a technical term, right theology, right doctrine, right teaching is antepenultimate, right? Mm-hmm. It is not the last and greatest, nor the second to last and second greatest, but the third to last and third greatest. Right theology exists to create a healthy church that's full of converted people who are being discipled, equipped to serve, and so on. Through that right theology, yes, but the theology exists to serve that, and that exists to glorify God and enjoy Him forever.
To bring that doxology.
And if you get that order wrong, right, you could preach doctrinally precise sermons that have no heart. They have no positive effect on the people's lives because it's not full of life. It's lost its focus, its purpose, if you will.
Yeah, or you can be preaching wonderfully accessible sermons for everyone who may or may not have grown up around church, or have no awareness of what the gospel
Yeah, mega
is.
churches do that all the time.
They do it all the time. Wonderfully accessible sermons for those who are outside of Christ, outside of his church, so that they can actually come. But the church at the same time ends up in egregious malnutrition.
Yeah, they never grow up.
They never grow up. And so they all sit there like an enormous daycare that never actually matures.
Right.
And then children, when they don't mature, will be discipled by someone else, and therefore the church gets compromised and becomes just like the culture, and therefore apostatizes. So these things should not be pitted against one another. Churches must be mindful of both.
And I don't want us to breeze by. What you guys both said was just brilliant, but I don't want us to forget what Joe said when he talked about the liberal experience, if you will, of that early missional movement, which was, we went after the lost often to the liberal side. But even today's culture, we hug left and we punch right.
Right.
But what you just said brings us to a brokenheartedness for lost people, not the kind of lost people we just particularly like.
Right.
So we should have a heart for the lost, not for the kind of lost that we think is more advantageous.
That's right. You don't get more points for seeing, I would tell a white church in an urban context, you don't get more points on God's scorecard for seeing a black person get saved. You don't get more points for seeing a liberal person get saved, or a gay person, or anything else. The point is to preach the gospel. What did you use? Profligately, right? Promiscuously. That was your word. I'm using the older word. Promiscuously, right? To all people, because all people need to hear this, and then they need to grow up and continue to do the same thing.
Yeah, and that for me as an African American, coming out of a black church where I had racism against the white church for a long time because I thought y'all didn't like us, and
I didn't know we were y'all, but exactly. Keep going.
The white church.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, you're not the y'all.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm talking broad, so don't send me an email.
I won't. I promise.
I know you won't.
If you do send him an email, please title it "Dear Y'all."
Oh God,
Dear y'all.
Oh God.
Or "We is y'all."
And so hearing this missional, this urgency for evangelism, it just tore down that pantete ethne, that all nations. I finally heard that with my good ear to understand this all nations mission. And then it just broadened our reality. So that's why, I used to hug left and punch right as well. And so now, man, I'm either punching left and right or I'm hugging left and right. But somebody said to me, I love what you're doing, Doug, long as you don't start going far right. And I says, I'm trying to get the right, the left, the up, the down, the hood, the burbs, rule. I want it all. So no, I will go after right, and I don't care what they call me, and I'll go after the left, and I don't care what they call me. We are determined to reach the lost of every direction. And that's my heart. And
that's to your point, that's the Lord's heart. So I don't care how you theoretically self-define as a church,
right,
and however you answer these sorts of discussive questions. If your church is doing a great job of being missional, but nobody's converting, it's a fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a fail. It just is. Right. It's a fail. You're
That's
not.
true.
It's a fail.
I already know some of the listeners are going to say, Adam named Judson, he ministered for 7 years before he saw a single convert. That's true. But he did eventually see converts. So,
absolutely.
Yes, there's timestamps on this stuff. Yes, the sovereignty of the Lord.
There's hard ground. There's all of it.
Yes. All of those caveats. At the end of the day, if you got a 50-year ministry and you never saw anybody saved, that cannot be chalked up to, this is just what the Lord wanted. I don't know if the Son of Man who came to seek and save the lost said, but I didn't want to reach the lost after 50 years in that place.
Yes, all the theologically precise guys that immediately come up with the sovereignty objections. We all believe in sovereignty, and he sovereignly saves.
Yes.
And so if he's not sovereignly saving through the good news in your church, you need to reevaluate that sovereign message that you have and whether or not it's actually in accord with the sovereign God for sovereignly reaching everybody, sovereignly who's ordained for election.
Sovereignly.
So sovereignly. Can we get the sovereignly into the people? Because he does sovereignly. So stop with that. And if you're constantly a fear of man, compromising, scared of what everybody might think, and you think, I'm doing the best job of just being faithfully present and being missional and loving my neighbors, and I'm being the hands and feet of Jesus, and I'm throwing seeds out the window, and look at those plants, and isn't that great? And nobody's getting saved. It's a fail. You're failing.
You're failing.
All you are doing is looking just like the surrounding culture. You are worshiping their gods, and they can't see our God clearly. And so stop worshiping in the high places and calling it missional, faithful presence, contextual living.
All this stuff.
Stop with all the
Incarnational ministry.
Incarnational, equivocal idolatry. Just stop with all of that and get about loving folks, sharing that good news with a clear proclamation. Watch God save. Stop being weird because you're perfectly theologically right, and stop being a capitulator because your liberal neighbors don't care.
Yeah, I mean,
they don't care.
Amen. I mean,
they
can
don't
we say any better than that?
I love that as the endpoint.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be right with no converts, what is that?
Right.
Yeah, what is that? I mean, I've been to baptism. I've been baptized. I know the joy of seeing somebody go under that water. I know the joy of somebody taking communion for the first time. I know it. We talked all this, and it was excellent. But doggone it, come to a baptism of a person who was going to hell, and now they're going to heaven. Amen. That's a big deal.
Yeah, never lose that joy.
Sing with the angels. Well, thanks, guys. Hopefully, folks have had a reinvigorated zeal for missions. I'm grateful for you. See you next time.
All right. Thanks.